Hello and welcome to a new, maybe one-off series, maybe multiple entries, called Beaver Tech Bytes. Today we're going to be upgrading Alden's PC with a new processor from AMD, a new motherboard, a new kit of RAM, and some lovely Noctua thermal paste. Let's get started, shall we?
Let's.
What you're gonna want to do before we start putting in the new stuff is take out the old stuff. We've got our front side panel here, and these just unscrew with thumb screws. You don't need any tools to take these side panels off. And then once you get the thumb screw undone, make sure you put it somewhere you'll remember, and then it just slides off. Just like that. Put that off to the side because we'll need it later when we put the computer back together. Now that we've got the PC open, we have it laid down on its side, and we're just going to start unplugging all of these internal components here. Oh, you know what we might want to do for mitigating static? Well, actually, first turn off the power supply. That's a big step. Probably should have done that before I unplugged it. And then what you can actually do is leave the power supply cable plugged in with the switch off, and this grounds the PC. So then by touching any metal part of the inside of the case, that discharges your static electricity. So what we're doing right now is disconnecting our SATA data and SATA power from the SATA SSD. This is one of the most worthwhile upgrades you can make to an older PC. If it's taking a long time to boot or just really sluggish, because a solid state drive actually has no moving parts. It's flash storage, similar to what you'd find on a USB stick or an SD card. And as a result of that, you actually don't even need to really mount them. You can just kind of stick them anywhere in your PC. It's not a best practice, but it'll work in a pinch.
Yeah, you want to avoid that with mechanical hard drives because they got spinning discs inside, so any kind of jostling on the case is going to make potentially some damage.
Right, yeah, those spinning metal platters are very delicate, very susceptible to damage quite easily. Next up, we're going to be taking out the RAM. Pay attention to how it's laid out in blue, red, blue, red. You want to alternate the slots when you install RAM on your motherboard, because that allows you to take advantage of dual channel memory. This is also one of the easiest upgrades you can make to your PC. You really only have to take out the side panel, open the clips, and stick it back in. We'll be getting into that later. This one's nice and easy to grab though. Make sure you undo the clips. Oh, there's still tape on this. We'll put our hard drive there for now, just so it's there when we need it.
A convenient to grab location.
Okay, next up, I think we should get this graphics card out of the way.
Sounds good.
So the way most graphics cards are set on the board, it obviously connects with the PCI Express slot on the motherboard, where it's locked in with these slot covers. You're first going to want to unscrew that. And again, make sure you have a convenient spot to put the screws. We're using some old Tupperware containers. Also, like red Solo cups will work in a pinch. There's only one screw, right?
Yeah, I think so. Should just pop out.
And then there it is. This is an EVGA GTX 960 FTW.
So now we get a pretty clear view of the motherboard now.
Oh, there's one more PCI Express card right here. This is a Wi-Fi adapter. You can see the antennas coming off the back here. So just like with the GPU, we get our screwdriver.
There you go. Ooh, got it.
And unscrew the PCI Express locks there. Set our screw somewhere. Which one did I put the other one in? And it just pops out, just like that.
All right. So here, this is the ATX power connector for the motherboard. And it can be very stubborn. There's a little clip on the back. It can be very stubborn to take out. So it's a good idea to brace your board.
And make sure you press on a plastic part and not directly touching the PCB or any of the motherboard traces.
And so once you have it braced down, just wiggle it out slowly. And it came out there. Sometimes these can be really stubborn to remove. But just slow and steady, wiggle it out, and it should come out eventually.
Now that we have everything disconnected from our board, we're going to start unscrewing the board itself and start assembling some of the new components. Now, these are a bit unusual. You don't often see thumb screws on a motherboard like this, but it does certainly make it a lot more convenient when you go to upgrade. So now that everything is out, you can just gently pull it back from the case and lift the whole board up. Oh, shit, there's still another SATA cable. So that could have been handled better, but the board is out.
Generally, it is better practice to remove things like the power supply and fans and fan cables when you're removing the motherboard, but in this instance, since we're only replacing just the motherboard, it didn't make a huge amount of sense to do that. So, before we put the parts in, I want to start by cleaning out the case a little bit because it's quite dusty in here. I haven't cleaned it in a good 7 months. So the first thing I want to do is I have fans on the front of the case pulling air in, and I have a filter on there that I want to get off to clean. So on this case, taking this front panel off is pretty easy. It's just got a few plastic clips along here that you just push down on to release it, and it comes out nice and easy.
That is a dusty boy.
That is a dusty filter. And just to show, if you don't have an air filter planned on your case,
all of that just goes straight into your computer, into your very expensive and delicate components.
Yes, indeed.
We're also going to be cleaning these case fans and exhaust grills here. We have a couple cans of Clean Doctor compressed air.
Basically, I'm doing this outside because I don't want to get dust all over my room. And so basically what you want to do is take your compressed air, don't turn it upside down because then you're going to spray aerosol and that's bad. But you want to just start to spray off some of the fans. And I don't know if it will show up on video, but there's a whole lot of dust coming off those.
That's showing up. What, are you trying to play Cyberpunk?
Yes. That's a perfectly reasonable way to try to spin some of the air off of the fans.
This one really needs it.
I want to make sure to get all the parts of the case as well. So you can see there's a whole lot of dust built up around this area here, so I'll spray that down as well. Dust will go everywhere, not just on the fans. Thankfully, these front fans aren't all that dusty inside thanks to that dust filter that I showed before.
I just noticed that.
Oh, you like the legs?
Yeah.
Yes, that's
the legs with a wig.
That creature's name is Tulexander instead of Alexander. It's Tulexander.
Okay, which fan did you miss?
I missed the top one.
Okay. So we have switched roles here because it's kind of cold outside, but these compressed air cans, they get really, really cold once you start using them. This fan's not even moving. There we go.
There it is.
Oh yeah, you can see all that coming out of there. That might just actually be liquid.
That might be. So now we can take the air to it.
It's like a first-person shooter.
Yeah, right?
Here,
let me do this.
Stick them out. Now that our old motherboard is out of the case, let's take a closer look at what exactly we're going to be putting into this thing. Now, originally, the reason we were doing this video is because Alden needed a new motherboard. We have picked out the ASRock B450M Pro 4, which has support for AMD Ryzen processors and uses the B450 chipset. With a simple BIOS update, this can also be supported by the new AMD Ryzen 5000 lineup, which is pretty exciting for future upgrades. But unfortunately, upgrading the motherboard is never quite as straightforward as it sounds on paper. New motherboards mean new sockets, which means new processors. Which is why we have here the AMD Ryzen 5 3600. This is a 6-core, 12-thread processor, perfect for mid-range gaming, some moderate productivity work, even some light photo and video editing. And in addition to the new processor and new motherboard, AMD Ryzen operates on DDR4, which meant Alden here has to upgrade from DDR3, which is why we have a kit of G-Skill's Ripjaws V DDR4 3000 MHz RAM. This is a 16 gig kit, dual channel support, 8 gigabytes in each stick. Let's start putting this together. So here we've got our new motherboard box on the table. As you can see, we didn't cheat. This is a first time unboxing of this. I've got your documentation here, quick installation guide, a little CD with drivers.
They still ship CDs?
Yeah. What's funny, I just got a new PC from CyberPower, and then they shipped the motherboard box too with like the extra cables and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it came with a CD too, which I don't have a CD drive. Granted, like all the drivers and stuff were up to date. And here it is, ladies and gentlemen. It's a brand new motherboard in a electrostatic discharge proof bag with some type of protective foam along the bottom here. So what we're actually going to do, before we put this into the computer, close up our box here, and then we can actually start assembling the components on top of this box, because the cardboard also provides a nice anti-static workspace if you don't have a full anti-static mat available. Ooh.
Oh, it's beautiful.
That. So the first thing we're going to install is our CPU. As you can see, this chip will go right into that middle socket there. We're engineers, baby. Obviously, this is not recommended. Get a little knife if you have one available.
I'm gonna be shocked if that makes it in.
In a really worst case scenario, a sharp flathead screwdriver will get the job done.
Are you an engineering major?
I'm a computer science major.
Oh, okay. I thought you were computer science.
I mean, no, actually, I'm in liberal arts. That's not to throw shade at liberal arts majors, but I mean, come on. This is what I'm doing with my Thursday afternoon. When you go to install your new CPU, you always want to make sure to hold it by this metal piece. That's the integrated heat spreader, or IHS. And then look at the underside. You can see right there on the board, there's a little golden triangle. And that is just going to line up with the little triangular mark on the board. And you don't want to use any force at all. It should just gently slide in. And pop our retention arm down. And you just install the CPU. So now we're going to open up the included Wraith stock cooler that comes with our processor, which is also the reason the box is so massive. And I haven't used one of these personally, but from what I've read, these give surprisingly good performance, especially for a stock cooler. And since you're not planning on overclocking, there's really no reason to have to upgrade this anytime soon. Look at that, that's already a lot bigger than your previous cooler.
That's a pretty good diameter fan, yeah.
Okay, now before we start actually installing this cooler, we have to remove these two plastic bits from the motherboard, which is where our fan is going to screw on. So what we've got here is the included cooler that comes with our CPU, and AMD has already applied a little coat of thermal paste there, but we're going to wipe this off with some isopropyl rubbing alcohol because we have purchased a little bit higher quality thermal paste. Not that this is bad, it'll get the job done, but if you already have better thermal compound, you might as well use it.
It's quite
That's
goopy.
Strong.
It is quite goopy, that's for
Careful
sure.
not to get that into the heatsink.
Yeah.
Hey, look. We found a COVID vaccine. It's right here the whole time.
The new Noctua vaccine. Get out of here, Pfizer.
Is that like a Moderna, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now that we've got the pre-installed thermal paste off of our cooler, we're going to be installing some Noctua thermal compound onto our CPU. So when we apply our thermal paste, less is more generally. You don't want to use too much. There's a really great example of how much is too much. If you look up The Verge's PC building guide, this is not going.
Might have to remove it.
Oh, yep. Yeah.
Ah. That would do it.
So we did have to remove
Hang on.
the
Oh my
end
God.
piece off of the tube. And now that that's off, let's put a little skosh of paste right in the center. It's probably plenty.
Yeah, the general rule of thumb to follow is about a pea-sized amount.
Mm-hmm. And if you've got something with a larger surface on the top, like a thread ripper, although I can't imagine who's watching this on a thread ripper. I can't imagine that the overlap of people who watch our content and people who own a thread ripper is anything more than 2 circles. But regardless, just kind of a pea-sized amount, unless you have a really large metal surface on the top there.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll set that off to the side. And then where's our fan header? So we've got a 4-pin fan header coming off of this fan, and that's going to attach right there onto our motherboard. Then I don't think it really matters which way it goes, so I'll just go logo facing towards the top of the case.
It's a rectangle, though.
Is it?
It is.
Oh, it does
So
matter.
you're going to have to go that way. So you want to make sure that you put your cooler directly on top of the CPU. You want to make sure it goes straight on top of your CPU to distribute the thermal paste well enough.
I'm not screwing this in fully yet. I'm just pressing down gently on all 4 corners just to get a sense of how our compound spreads, like not at all. It'll probably spread more when we screw it down though.
It will.
Okay. I feel like Tony Stark putting the arc reactor in.
Oh, yeah. And then when you screw in your CPU cooler, you want to alternate your corners. So start at
one corner, and then you go to the opposite corner, and then kind of follow an X pattern.
Yeah, and make sure, you don't want to screw them in all the way. You want to do like 3 turns, and then 3 turns, and then 3 turns, and then 3 turns.
There's 3.
And the reason for that is, 1, to equally distribute the thermal paste we just put down, but also to make sure that the board doesn't have too much tension.
Pressure of any one screw.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that feels like it's on there pretty tight. That's not going anywhere.
Great. Lovely.
We'll set our screwdriver off to the side here. And then we can connect our fan to our fan header. A nice little trick you can do with these kind of tougher braided cables, you can actually tie it around itself, like so, and that will take up some of the slack that you've got built up. Yep, there we go, and it just slides on. We've got our CPU and our cooler attached, so we're gonna go ahead and slot in our RAM. We're gonna take our brand new DDR4 RAM. This is clocked at 3000 megahertz. Oh, that is nice.
That looks very good. Very good.
Nice metal unit there. Oh, they came with a little case sticker as well.
How nice.
Yeah. If you like stickers, PC building is a fun hobby to get into. Like I was telling Alden the other day, I'm gonna teach my kids how to build computers, and they won't have money for drugs. That's not just a tech tip, that's a life tip.
Thinking ahead.
Ooh, yeah. You wanna hold one of these?
Yeah, let's see. Oh, those are weighty. It's like full metal on the outside too.
That's DDR4, it's heavier.
Very nice.
It's one number higher.
It's like how when you fill up a hard drive, it weighs more.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, now, one thing that's important to note when you're installing RAM onto a motherboard, when you're going for a dual channel configuration, like so, you need to alternate your slots. So you might think that you go like AA, BB, but it's really more of a AB, AB configuration that you want. So then when you go to install your memory, make sure this notch in your unit lines up with the same notch on your motherboard. And then you just line up the ends with the slot and press down. You should hear a click and a click on both sides, and that is in. Same thing on the other side. Make sure we unclip our memory clip. And one thing to notice, on a lot of newer motherboards, these bottom RAM clips aren't clips at all. These don't move. So don't try to force those or they will break. And once again, we just slide, I had that like diagonal. Just slide that in on each end, and why is this so tough to get in? There it goes. There we go. Okay. And a little click there. So now I believe we've got just about everything on the board that we can before it has to go back into the case. So we'll go grab the rest of the computer and start putting it back together. So before we put this new motherboard in, we're going to have to remove the I/O shield. That was from our last one. Every motherboard has a different layout. This is super sharp. And be really careful when you handle these, because these things are sharp enough that it's become just a really common trope for people to accidentally, slice a finger open and bleed a little bit when they build a new PC. So we can just put this anywhere, really. We don't really need it. And then we'll grab our new one, which you can see still in the packaging. gonna sound lovely. Okay. And then, as you can see, this is, well, you know, since it's made for this motherboard, it's obviously going to line up nice and tight with those. Now, what you need to do before you install the I/O shield is bend these pins. Is it back? Bend them back, right?
Yeah.
So bend them back and out of the way, just to make sure that they don't make contact with any of the ports on your motherboard, because it is metal touching metal, so that can cause a short, and in worst case scenarios, just like fry whatever port or even the board itself. So now we've got our I/O shield all prepped. We want to make sure that the readable side is going to be facing out, and then nothing fancy here, it just slides in and you kind of press into each corner like so. There.
Very nice.
Feels like a good sturdy mount.
It doesn't need to be too sturdy either, because the motherboard's going to be pressing against it.
Right, it's not like this is a really high movement part either. So, now that we've got everything attached to the board that we can at this point, Alden's going to go ahead and put it into the case.
So the main thing you want to keep in mind is to try to line up the motherboard with the I/O shield in the back, and also with the screw risers into the holes. So you can see there's a screw riser right there and a hole right there. So I need to try to line those two up.
That looks good.
Almost. It's not quite lining up with the I/O shield correctly. There it goes.
There.
So
Okay.
it will take some finagling, but eventually you can check all your screw holes and see that they're all lined up, and you can put your screws in.
Yep. Remember those thumb screws from before? These will usually come with your case, not the board itself. So make sure you hang on to them.
So now we're just putting in the final cables to our motherboard now that that's installed. So adding the SATA cables back in, plugging the fans back in.
Unmounting the hard drive or the SSD from the wall.
Removing
I'm
it from
impressed,
its
actually, that's really good tape.
convenient storage location. Yeah, gaff tape is killer. Gaff tape is amazing.
Now that we've finished installing our motherboard and reconnecting all of our intricate little case cables, we spared you the boredom of having to sit through that. We're going to install the graphics card and test everything out, make sure it boots up.
So when you're putting the graphics card in, you want to make sure to always put it in the top slot, because it gets the most bandwidth on the motherboard.
Make sure you prepare the PCI slot like that, putting down the clip.
Like that.
Or putting
up
up
the
the
clip.
clip, because the weight of the card presses it down to lock it in. So, yeah, I keep trying to focus on your hand.
Okay, there we go.
And there you have it. Then you just need to take one of your PCI screws and a handy dandy screwdriver and just lock it down.
Boom.
So the next thing you have to do, once you get the graphics card actually installed in the slot and locked down, is you want to connect the power from your power supply. This card uses an 8-pin power connector. So we're going to take a 6 and 2-pin power connector from our power supply.
Okay.
We're gonna make an attempt to manage these cables. It's a little more difficult to do so with a non-modular power supply.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is basically all of these cables are directly permanently attached to the power supply versus in a modular where you can remove and add cables that you need or don't need as you see fit.
And so now all of our cables are in. The last thing we're going to do is to plug in the power to the motherboard.
Yep, that's that same 24-pin ATX connector that we had to wrestle with a bit before. Hopefully getting it in will be easier than getting it out. And hopefully it's a long, long time before you have to upgrade the motherboard again.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Instantly
Nice
easy.
tight click. Okay.
There it is.
Great. So, now that all of the components are back inside the computer where they should be, we're gonna attempt to turn this on and hope we didn't mess anything up too bad.
Yes,
it should work
indeed.
fine. We're semi-professionals.
All right, so we have power all hooked back in. It's good practice to not put the side panels back on until you make sure that everything works. So here we go. Hit the power button.
And then naturally we've got our keyboard, mouse, and monitor all hooked up again. We'll clear off the workspace later.
Want to look at the monitor, see, and
Hey,
there we go.
There we go.
So
it posted.
So we can.
Post is the power on self-test that every motherboard does before you get to your operating system.
So I've just gone into the BIOS here, and we can see everything's being registered correctly. AMD Ryzen 5, that's what we just installed. 16 gigabytes of RAM, that's correct. Again, remember we have two 8 gigs in alternating slots.
Set to 3000 megahertz.
As shown here.
Yep, we've gone ahead and enabled XMP in the BIOS. And that's how you get the maximum speed out of your memory. Otherwise it defaults to, I want to say 2133?
I believe that's correct.
Something to that effect.
So
Not that memory speed will make or break your computer, but it's nice to have.
you spent money on it, you might as well make sure it works correctly. So there we go.
It's as simple as that. Well, there you have it, folks. We've finished the upgrades that we set out to do, and unfortunately that is all the time we have for this video. If you enjoyed this type of content, please let us know. We might make more of it in the future. I just found out our engineer is building a computer next week. If you're interested in some of our other KBVR TV content, be sure to check out Geeking Out About It and Locals Live. Those are both of our shows, as well as following KBVR TV on social media on Instagram and Twitter. Check us out on Twitch at twitch.tv/KBVRTV26, and have a good one. Thanks for watching.